Hi, welcome to Shonia Studio. Be careful when we meet people we don't know. Not mean to think negative things, but in living this life, we are required to always be vigilant. The case that we will discuss this time is a clear example of the need for vigilance, and in this case, the cause of the death penalty exists in that country. Before we continue, we want to tell you that this story is a true story. Therefore, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the Shonia Studio channel. And let's get straight to the point, and welcome to Shonia Studio. In 1978, in Las Vegas, United States, lived a teenager, named Mary Vincent, who was 15 years old. Mary has a hobby of dancing, and dreams of becoming a professional dancer. Mary's parents were a less than harmonious couple. They often had big fights. When her parents decided to separate, Mary ran away from her home. For a few days she lived on the streets, then she decided to visit her grandfather who lived in California. After a while there, Mary was homesick and wanted to go back to Las Vegas. When her grandfather was not at home, Mary also left the place. In those days not many people had cars, so asking for a roadside ride or hitchhiking was very common. On September 29, 1978, Mary decided to head to her home in Las Vegas by way of a hitchhike. On the side of the road he met two other hitchhikers heading to the same city. The three of them held a piece of paper that said "Going South." After waiting for a long time, finally, in the late afternoon a blue van came to a stop in front of them. The car was driven by a 50-year-old man, whose name was Lawrence Singleton. Mary immediately approached the car and asked if the three of them could ride in Lawrence's car. Lawrence then replied that he could only give one person a ride, and only Mary could come with him. Although the car is a van type and is quite large, but when looking at the back of the car it had no seats at all. Mary then went over to her two friends. The two friends said they were suspicious, and asked Mary not to ride in the car. However, because his desire to return home is very high, and Mary couldn't wait any longer, she decided to get into the car. On the way, Lawrence and Mary started talking. Lawrence tells about his life, and he has a daughter who is the same age as Mary. Lawrence looked very good and Mary felt the old man was like her grandfather. Because the journey is still very far, Mary asked Lawrence's permission because she was very tired and wanted to sleep. Lawrence very politely asked Mary to rest. After some time, Mary woke up. When looking around, Mary realized that the path she was on was not leading to the prayer, as agreed at the beginning. In this position, Mary began to be suspicious of the middle-aged man. Mary ventured, and said that the path he was taking was wrong. Lawrence casually said that he had not taken that path on purpose. Lawrence turned the car around. Then Lawrence said that they would stop for a moment, because Lawrence needed to pee. After the car stopped and Lawrence got up from his seat, Mary got down and tied her shoelaces tightly. This is done, so that she is ready when something unexpected happens. However, suddenly something hit Mary's head very hard, which made her fall unconscious. It turned out that Lawrence had hit Mary with a hammer. Moments later, Mary woke up from her stupor. She was in the back of the car in a supine position. When she looked around, they were still in the same place. When Mary wanted to move her arms and legs, she couldn't because Mary's hands and feet were tied with ropes. Then Lawrence opened the back door. He began to approach Mary, and one by one Mary's clothes were taken off by him. Lawrence then raped Mary very brutally. Mary repeatedly begged the old man to let her go. But Lawrence didn't answer, and continued his lecherous act for several hours. Exhausted, Lawrence returned to the front seat and drifted off to sleep. In the back of the car, Mary, still tied, lamented her fate. She didn't know what would happen next. The van returned to the highway, then Lawrence turned again onto a quiet road in the woods. There he again tortured Mary. Seeing his victim who was already helpless, Lawrence untied Mary's hands and feet. In her bloody state and helpless body, Mary begged to be released. Then Lawrence got out of the car and asked her to get down on her knees. Lawrence then said, "You want to be free? Okay, I'll accept it." Then Lawrence took an axe out of the car. He then took hold of Mary's left hand, and swung the axe with all his might. Mary's hand suddenly slipped from her body. Mary fell backwards, but did not stop there. Lawrence then took Mary's right hand. Knowing what would happen next, Mary tried to fight back, gripping Lawrence's hand. However, with 5 slashes, Mary's right hand was released from her body. Not far from where they parked, there is a water canal, which reaches a depth of 9.1 meters. Lawrence dragged Mary's body, then threw her there. While looking at his victim's body from above, Lawrence said, "Now you are free." Unexpectedly, Mary is still alive. As a result of being thrown from a height, 4 of Mary's ribs were broken. It turned out that when both of her hands were slashed by Lawrence, Mary didn't die. She just pretended by closing her eyes, and didn't make a sound at all. She did this, because she realized that if the old bastard found out that Mary was still alive, then Lawrence would have killed Mary right away. Don't cry like that. Really, totally unimaginable. With the condition that both hands are gone, plus broken ribs. Mary tried to get up. But she didn't want to, because it could be that old bastard, still waiting for her up there. Covered in blood and mud, Mary huddled in the tunnel. Due to blood loss, Mary felt sleepy, but suddenly a voice whispered in her ear, "If you fall asleep then you can't take your revenge." And most likely the old bastard would be free to do it again, to another woman. After hearing that voice, the hatred inside Mary rose. She decided to crawl upstairs. She didn't care anymore if the old bastard was waiting for her there. Slowly, Mary tried to crawl up, resting on her elbows. After making it to the top, Mary walked with her arms raised. This is done, so that the blood does not flow too fast. And the muscles don't fall out. Arriving at the highway, there was a car that passed. The car actually slowed down, but seeing Mary's condition, which was covered in blood and mud, and her terrible condition, the driver became very frightened. Then drive the car as fast as possible. Mary, don't despair. She then walked for 4.8 kilometers, until finally a car approached her. The car was driven by a pair of young. After undergoing surgery and treatment for a month, Mary's condition improved. She then used a prosthetic hand to help her in her activities. The police then asked about the characteristics of the perpetrator. In great detail, Mary gave an explanation of the old scumbag. The police then made a sketch and distributed it to the public. The sketch of the face finally reached Lawrence's neighbor. She then called the police and said that her neighbor had a very similar face to the person the police were desperately looking for. The police finally caught the bastard. In court, Mary testified to what she had been through. With all available evidence, Lawrence was charged with kidnapping, rape, and murder. Although Lawrence's actions were numerous, however, at that time the court system in the state could only give a maximum sentence of 14 years to a criminal. I was begging for my life, asking to him to let me free. I wake up every morning with the reality, I have to live without hands. Of course, we all agree that what happened to Mary was horrific and left a wound that will never go away. When the judge had made the decision, in the courtroom, as Mary was about to leave the courtroom, Lawrence had whispered to her, "I had to finish this job, even if it cost me my whole life." What's even more terrifying is that Lawrence is on parole after serving 8 years in prison. He received leniency for his good behavior during his imprisonment. This made the people very angry. When Lawrence was released from prison, many towns and cities publicly did not accept his presence. The government then facilitates Lawrence to change his identity, so that he can finally live in a container in San Quentin, California. And soon he moved to the city of Florida. Knowing that the old bastard had been released from prison, Mary, who at that time had 2 children, became very scared and paranoid. Because it could be, the old bastard kept his word during the trial. But after Lawrence lived in Florida, a neighbor said, at first he was very afraid of Lawrence's figure, but after several conversations, he felt that Lawrence was a pretty good person, and friendly. Even Lawrence had helped him repair the house. At this moment, Lawrence looked like a normal person. But in 1997, when Lawrence's neighbor was painting on the second floor, from that room he could see through the window of Lawrence's room. And how shocked he was, when he saw the most terrible sight. A woman lay helplessly on the bed, and Lawrence stabbed her with a knife multiple times. This neighbor immediately called the police. After arriving at the scene, the police found a woman lying sadly in Lawrence's room. The woman, named Roxanne Hayes, was 31 years old. This incident also spread in the newspapers. Mary, who heard of the incident, testified again, for what she had experienced, with the aim that that bastard Lawrence got the punishment he deserved. And finally the court ruled, Lawrence Singleton, who was 69 years old at the time, was sentenced to the maximum sentence of death. However, In 2001, before he was executed by the court, Lawrence died in prison due to the cancer he suffered. After the events that she went through, living her life as a mother and also an artist, Mary also taught her son to always be wary of strangers. From this case we can see, Mary has a very strong determination with everything she has experienced. Mary was able to rise from adversity. We agree that what happened to Mary was beyond our comprehension. If Mary was able to rise from this very bad thing, we should be able to rise from the problems that befell us today. Keep the spirit and don't forget to subscribe to Shonia Studio. See you later.